Like, you waited until I finished making that noise to click
You're
record. I was just doing a really elongated
You're like,
No, I did not do it like
Yeah,
that.
you did. That's what it was.
I was just like, Well,
right.
hello everybody.
Hello.
We're here.
I'm Yara,
I'm Morgan.
and we are Mysteriosities. Your goal is to elongate everything you say today.
I don't know, it just sounded like fun.
Alright, so it is my episode.
Yes, our order has gotten a little funky, but it does make sense in our minds. So
Yeah.
We'll go back to a more normal back and forth starting now.
Yeah. Since we're from Ohio, I thought it'd be cool to do an unsolved murder in Ohio.
Love that.
So I will be covering the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, also known as Cleveland's torso murderer.
I do not know
I've
anything about...
So I've heard the title before. I don't know where. It's probably some show or something. But like, I was just researching Ohio killers or whatever because I wanted to do something to represent Ohio in the worst way.
The way that you just went so deep and weird for that word.
Yeah.
Represent. Scared me a little bit.
That's okay.
But yeah, for it being an Ohio murderer and for us being in Ohio, I know, I've heard the name too, but I also don't know anything about it. I think I heard it in Criminal Minds.
Yeah, they have
it
talked
referenced.
about it. Actually, one of my websites that I used was a Criminal Minds fandom wiki.
Look, I'm not judging you because I use that for the Monster Florence.
Yeah,
And
it's like super cool. We're going to start off with just a brief history of the area of Kingsbury Run in Cleveland, Ohio. Kingsbury Run is located on the east side of Cleveland near Shaker Heights that stretched west through Kinsman Avenue and down to the Cuyahoga River. The name Kingsbury Run comes from James Kingsbury. He was the first inhabitant of Newburgh, which was a township just south of Cleveland.
Which I will say, Kingsbury Run doesn't sound like it should be in Cleveland. It sounds like it should be in, like,
England?
London.
Yeah,
Like,
it sounds
it's just like a cool, really, like, I
British.
don't know. It doesn't have, like, Ohio vibes. It's not named, like,
Right.
Cornstalk Road or anything like that.
Cornstalk Road.
Yeah, you never been down Cornstalk Road?
Let's meet down on Cornstalk Road. That'd be in Fairfield County.
Well, that is where you're from,
Yeah.
so.
Anyway, in the late 1800s, the city commissioned a new sewer tunnel project. It was supposed to pass through Kingsbury Run under Kinsman Avenue. Kingsbury Run separated Cleveland from Newburgh and became an area for railroad traffic. Once the Great Depression occurred, Cleveland's workforce took a hit. So the minorities and the immigrants were the worst hit, which always happens. The worst hit included the African American community, the Hungarian community, and Kinsman, Czech, and Slovak neighborhoods along the banks of the Cuyahoga River. These groups became displaced and they began to take up residence in abandoned plots of land, forming communities of their own called shantytown. So, a shantytown formed in Kingsbury Run, and the impoverished population began to grow throughout the 1930s. Continued to grow as large waves of new groups moved there from other lakefront shantytowns because they were being removed by the city. So it was kind of just like the collect-all. It was just like the
A little gumbo, if you will.
Yeah. I like that, gumbo. Just east of Kingsbury Run, there was a place known as the Roaring Third, and this is where, like, all of its bars, gambling dens, and brothels were.
It's like a pretty cool name.
It is, isn't it?
I like it.
The Roaring Third.
I don't know why I like it, but I do. I like it. I think it's cool.
In 1938, 2 days after the last two bodies were found, which we'll get into in a little bit, Elliot Ness, Cleveland's safety director, ordered a raid of the area. And that raid resulted in 300 squatters being evicted and at least 100 shanty homes burned. Ironically, 2 decades later, the city decided to turn the area into a low-income housing area as part of the Garden Valley Federal Urban Renewal Project. So it was basically going right back to what it was. All right, so let's get into the history of the killer. The Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run is still unidentified to this day.
I was going to ask that. That was the first thing I was going to ask.
There are speculations, and we will go over those. In my opinion, I think it's solved, but there was corruption.
Ooh.
And most of the victims are unidentified as well. All of the victims' remains were found in the impoverished neighborhood of Kingsbury Run. The first victim believed to be killed by the butcher was found on September 23rd, 1935. This person was estimated to have been killed 3 to 4 weeks before that date. The last 2 victims that were believed to be killed by the same butcher were found on August 16th, 1938. These victims had also been in the dump site for several weeks before their bodies were found, the last 2. Kind of like what the method of the killer was, the modus operandi. The sex and age of victims varied, so it's kind of like a toss-up. All were typically people from the lower class, though, usually drifters.
So high-risk victims.
Right. Usually the victims were killed by decapitation, sometimes after tying them up. Then the bodies were usually severely mutilated post-mortem.
Being decapitated has got to be, like, pretty high on the list of, like, not the way I would like to be killed.
Yeah, no.
Like,
I'd rather not be killed at all.
Well, yeah, but you're not a vampire. Or...
Well, I mean, I don't mind...
Or a high fae.
I mean, I don't mind dying in a normal way. I just don't want to be killed. There's a difference.
Okay, sorry. I'm just saying, like, decapitation is not pleasant. Because you gotta realize, like, that it's usually not one swing. People don't have guillotines. If they're hacking your head off, that's taking a minute. Like, that's unpleasant. It reminds me of during the Tudor era. I think it was Thomas Cromwell. But one of Henry VIII's advisors was beheaded as Henry VIII did. But the headsman, he had to, like, swing that axe so many times. He was hungover, and he did a bad job.
Well, I think it was implied in the show.
It was implied in the show that
he did it on purpose, wasn't it?
That the headsman did it on purpose?
No.
People got him drunk in the show.
Purpose, yeah.
And I can't remember if that's historically accurate. I think it is, actually. I think I did read that, like, there's, like, witnesses of him being out the night before. Yeah. But in the show, it's heavily implied that, like, I think it was Charles Brandon or people like that, like, got him drunk, so he was hungover and did a really bad job of the execution. Whereas when Anne Boleyn was beheaded, a headsman was brought in from France, and he was a headsman that used a sword instead of an axe. Yeah. Because it was supposed to be quicker, and it was done in one blow. Not that other guy. He was chopped up, and that's not pleasant. That's very unpleasant.
Not at all.
Don't love that.
So he would severely mutilate bodies post-mortem, oftentimes dismembering the arms and the legs, cutting off their genitals, removing organs, and then burning the bodies. So he kind of did it all. And usually in order to burn the bodies, oil or acid or some other chemical was used as an accelerant.
So you're saying, like, the parts that were found were, like, burnt?
Usually.
Or, like,
some of them. Not all of them, but yes.
I wonder why he even bothered doing that, because usually if you're burning something or, like, putting it in acid, you're trying to get rid of it entirely, but if it didn't even get rid of it entirely, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. So because the act was very violent and very bloody, investigators believe that the killing was carried out somewhere private, and then their bodies were taken to the dump site in which they would burn their victims.
100%.
Yeah,
because
which
the amount
comes
of blood,
into play later.
The amount of blood that there would be.
And then in some of the cases, the heads of the bodies were never found, which made investigators believe that the butcher possibly kept them as a trophy or for something else. And
we just don't want to know what.
Yeah, that just creeps me out. Can you imagine, like, knowing that person and you just wander in a room and you see these heads? Oh.
Well, hopefully wherever they're keeping their heads is not somewhere you would wander. That seems very stupid of them.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, I gotta use the bathroom. Okay, just don't open the shower. Oh, yeah, those are just some heads.
Awkward.
I was just giving them a nice shampoo. That's why they're in the shower.
Oh my god. So they labeled him as a psychopath, which valid. I think that's a good assessment.
Yeah.
Seems pretty psycho-y.
Not psycho-y.
You know me, I love to make up words. They believed that the butcher had some knowledge of anatomy, possibly being a physician, a butcher, or a hunter. The cuts definitely showed that the butcher was skilled at cutting the victim's flesh. Because they believed the killer committed his crimes elsewhere and had to carry the bodies to the dump spot, they believed that he was probably pretty large and strong.
Maybe he had a wheelbarrow.
That would be a little conspicuous.
More conspicuous than carrying a body?
Yeah, they could be whatever. Maybe it's a sack of flour.
Maybe a sack of flour in a wheelbarrow.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just saying.
But like, well, I guess you could have that. But it's like an urban area, so
I was just being contrary. It's okay. He probably didn't have a wheelbarrow.
We don't know what he had because we don't even know who he is. The killer also would have been pretty familiar with the Kingsbury Run area, and the authorities theorized that the choice of victims and how badly they were mutilated was a way that the killer made sure that the victims were never identified. Obvi.
Yeah, I do feel as though that is fair.
Yeah. So let's get into the victims. On September 23rd, 1935 was the first victim that was found. There were 2 found that day. There was an unidentified man, castrated post-mortem, decapitated. The estimated time of death was 3 to 4 weeks earlier, and he was found at Jackass Hill area of Kingsbury Run, which that's a real place. It's Jackass Hill.
I'm sorry, what?
Maybe they really like donkeys.
Maybe they really liked the Jackass series. It's top-notch cinema.
It didn't exist yet.
Maybe they knew it did.
Maybe.
What was I going to say? Oh, you know what I think is really interesting?
What?
I mean, you mentioned it vaguely earlier, and now you're going into it, and I feel like you'll be continuing to mention it. Like, the bodies are dumped a fair amount of time after they're killed.
Well, they're being found.
Oh, okay. So it's in an area where, like, they could have been chilling for 4 weeks and nobody would have seen it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's like a dump area.
Jackass Hill is a dump?
Wow, it's the area of Kingsbury Run, which Kingsbury Run in general was kind of a dump because it was a shanty town.
So it's 100% fact.
I don't know for sure. I mean, it never said that they've speculated that he was dumping them later. It was just when they were found.
I mean, to be fair, it takes a long time to dismember somebody, so like it would make sense.
Right. This next one, Andrew, they actually knew who he was. Andrew W. Andrassy. Mm-hmm. He was also castrated post-mortem. His body was drained of blood, and he was found close to the location of the first unidentified man. And his estimated time of death was 2 to 3 days earlier.
So those were the 2 bodies found first?
Yeah.
So they were found at the same time?
Yeah, they were found at the same time.
I don't know. That makes me feel like he dumped that one guy late.
Maybe.
Because there's no... I don't know.
Maybe he was doing, like, experiments or something. I don't know. Like, when we get into the talk of who it could have possibly been, I mean, experiments could have made sense. But that was never speculated by the authorities.
I'm just saying, if they're found at the same time, it makes me feel like they were dumped together. And if they were dumped together
But they were in different areas. I mean, they were in the same location. How were they found at the same
time? What are the odds that he dumped a body and then came back 3 weeks later and then dumped another body and then they were both found at the same time?
Maybe one was placed in a more... I don't know. Because they were around the same area, I guess.
I think he dumped them at the same time and he had the other body for longer.
Maybe. So then, that was September of 35. There's a little gap. And then in January of 1936, Florence...
That really is a little gap. Like, that's not that much time.
Little gap. Florence Genevieve Polillo was found.
Oh, that's such a pretty name.
She was dismembered post-mortem. She was wrapped in newspaper inside half-bushel baskets. Her head was never found. Polillo was a sex worker and barmaid. Her estimated time of death was 2 to 4 days earlier, found in downtown Cleveland. The next victim was known as the Tattooed Man.
Oh, okay.
They don't really know who he was, but they called him the Tattooed Man because he was completely covered in tattoos, which I'm like, how did they not know who he was?
I know, you kind of feel like if somebody has that many tattoos, you could just go to tattoo artists and be like, do you recognize any of these? And then someone's going to be like, yeah. And then
like,
they'd be like, yeah, I remember
like,
that guy.
Did he get him in the war? Did he, you know what I mean? Like,
but if you have he has a bunch of them.
I don't know how many, but he had a lot.
He's called the Tattooed Man. I bet he had a bunch of them.
Is it a bunch in our terms of a bunch, or was it a bunch in 1936? You know?
I don't know. I feel like if he's called the Tattooed Man, he has a bunch in any era of the world.
So this happened June 5th. He was decapitated while alive.
I was saying earlier, that's really unpleasant.
And his head was recovered. 2 boys, this is terrible, 2 boys who cut school to go fishing found a rumpled pair of pants under a tree, and tucked inside was a man's head, which was the tattooed man. Can you imagine, like, just the purity of just, oh, I'm gonna skip school so that we can go fish because we're gonna have a good time, and then you find a decapitated head.
If I found random pants on the ground, though, I'm not touching them.
That's true. I'm like, oh, that's weird.
I'd be like, who is sans pants right now running around? And I'd be like, did somebody poop in their pants and they eliminated their pants from their body?
Sailor suit.
I would not be touching those pants.
The rest of the body was found nearby railroad tracks. This is when the Cleveland police realized that they had a serial killer on their hands. The estimated time of death for the tattooed man was 2 days earlier, and he was found at Kingsbury Run. And then in July of 1936, so that's like
another little gap.
Just a month. So there was another unidentified man found. He was dismembered while still alive, and his head was recovered. Blood on the ground suggests that he was killed on the site, which is different than all of the other victims.
That's very interesting because you just kind of think you'd have to think through that kind of kill, that you wouldn't be able to just be like, I'm just going to decapitate this man on the street.
His estimated time of death was 2 months earlier than he was found.
Oh, damn. And that would obviously, that was found. That was not dumped if he was killed there. So that's crazy.
And
that's a long time.
He was found at Big Creek area of Brooklyn, which was west of Cleveland. And this was the only known West Side victim. So I'm like wondering if something happened to piss this guy off that made him kind of go off his tracks.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like, because it's just not
like
very
more
similar to the rest.
In the heat of the moment kill rather than like planned. Yeah. So then there's another little gap, and on September 10th, another unidentified man was found. His head was never found. Evidence shows that the head was cut off in one blow.
Damn.
Only half the torso was found, nothing below the hips. Estimated time of death was 2 days earlier for him, and he was also found at Kingsbury Run. And now we go into 1937. February 23rd of 1937, an unidentified woman was found. Her head was never recovered. Her estimated time of death was 3 to 4 days earlier, and she was found on the Lake Erie shore at Euclid Beach. And then another woman in June of 37. They think that it was Rose Wallace, which was his only black victim. She was decapitated, and a rib bone was removed post-mortem.
That's kind of weird.
Isn't it weird?
That's a little
Which kind of is like, it could lead to your, like, maybe he's keeping the bodies and, like, doing research or whatever, because once the head was recovered, but the estimated time of death was 1 year earlier.
Ooh.
Yeah, so, and that could definitely go with the researchy side of it, because, like, a rib bone is really freaking weird.
Yeah, I can't wrap my head around why that
Just
would be
one rib bone. Strange. She was found beneath the Lorraine Carnegie Bridge. And then in July of 37, an unidentified man was found. His body was recovered, but again, his head was never found. But they found that his heart had been ripped out. And his abdomen literally gutted.
Okay, that seems like an escalation to
right?
me.
His estimated time of death was 2 to 3 days earlier. And he was pulled out of the Cuyahoga River in the Cleveland Flats. So, like, part of me is like, is this the same guy?
I mean, I feel like probably the same guy, because the odds of 2 serial killers.
That's true. That's true.
In the same city at the same time.
The same area.
Is not
a little weird.
Yeah, it's a little crazy.
So then there's a pretty, well, I mean, not big gap, but from what he has been. April 8th, 1938, an unidentified woman was found. Only the victim's lower leg was recovered at first. Police searched the area and found a burlap sack under the West 3rd Street Bridge with the victim's headless torso cut in half, with a thigh and a left foot dismembered as well. And she was the only victim to have drugs in her system. Estimated time of death for her was 3 to 5 days earlier, and she was found in the Cuyahoga River in the Cleveland Flats.
And the thing about finding bodies in rivers, too, is it makes you wonder if there are more, because rivers have currents, which means they could be drifted out far, 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 far from your area. There could be more in there.
And then the same year, 1938, on August 16th, 2 people were found, an unidentified woman and an unidentified man. The unidentified woman was decapitated. Her head was recovered, though. Her estimated time of death was 4 to 6 months earlier.
That's a long time.
Found East 9th Street Lakeshore dump. which this will come into play later, but was within view of Elliot Ness's office window, which he was the investigator on the case, seemingly done to taunt Ness.
Oh, damn. Okay.
All right, so the unidentified man that was found on the same day as the woman, he was decapitated, and his head was found in a can.
In a
like
can?
A trash can.
Okay, I was thinking like a tin can.
And
Yeah, I know. That's why I was confused, because I couldn't think of any other kinds of cans.
He has a very small head.
I was just really confused.
He was found at the same time as the Jane Doe above, which I think they were known as John and Jane Doe, like at the same time, because they were found at the same time.
That's a little bit presumptuous. They were not necessarily a couple. Exactly, Minerva. I agree.
Podcast. They were found pretty close to each other, and the estimated time of death for him was 7 to 9 months earlier.
That's a very long time.
Yep. So, some of the possible victims that they never confirmed. The Lady of the Lake, September 5th of 1934.
It's a creepy, like, ominous little title, I feel like.
She was found almost on the same dump site as the first unidentified woman, which that would have been a year earlier. There was presence of a preservative chemical that the butcher used in some of the others.
See, that lends to him keeping the bodies.
And then another possible victim was Robert Robertson, found July 22nd, 1950, which is a big gap, so I don't know. He was found decapitated. The estimated time of death was 6 to 8 weeks earlier. Coroner believed it to be the workings of the Mad Butcher, but the police never thought so.
I just think that's a really big gap.
Yeah, me too.
And I feel like, I don't know anything about the suspects yet, but I just always think it's weird when it so abruptly stops. But,
right.
But that makes me feel like they maybe died or like got arrested, or always like that sort of guess when when someone stops.
Yeah.
And so for it to just be one more 15 years later or however many years later, like, I don't know. That seems unlikely to me.
Weird. And then also there were 3 prostitutes that were killed May 3rd of 1940. They were all decapitated and dismembered. But they were found in the swamps of Pennsylvania.
Well,
which is...
could have moved. That's not far away.
No, it's really not.
It's our neighbor.
And then there was numerous unidentified bodies between 1921 and 1934, and then 1939 to 1942. They were all decapitated, dismembered, and found in swamps in Pennsylvania.
I feel like, maybe he moved.
Also, there's a theory that the Cleveland torso murder case has connection to the January 15th, 1947 murder of Elizabeth Short, also known as...
Black Dahlia.
Yep. I thought that was a cool little... I was like, I'm going to let her finish this because I know she knows it.
Thank you. Thank you. But that's far away.
Yeah, that's West California,
Coast.
Wasn't it?
That's California. Yeah, that's not... I mean, not to say that he couldn't have...
Took a trip
and then came back. Like, I'm not saying that's impossible, but that definitely is the other side of the country.
Yeah, that's just a theory, so...
It's interesting.
If we talk about Elliot Ness a little bit... He was the investigator on the case. So, summer of 1936, police concluded that 6 killings from within the past year were not isolated incidents. So they're like, this is a serial murder. Ness took charge of it, and that was on September 12th of 1936. He's like, I'm gonna figure this out. And he was known to be very intense and kind of an asshole, actually. He just wanted to get the job done.
He's just trying to catch serial killers.
But a group of police were sent to go through Kingsbury Run looking for anything out of the ordinary while Ness studied everything to do with the torso murderer cases. Ness ended up meeting privately with the head of the Scientific Investigation Bureau, David Coles, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, to come up with a unique way to stop the killer. Cowles picked out 8 undercover men with connections to the underworld to track down the killer, and then Ness also released his unknowns onto the case, which Elliot Ness was the cop in The Usual Suspects.
Oh, so it was based off of?
Yeah.
That was a good movie.
But he also did, like, other stuff, like other big stuff, too, that he was known for. But you want to get into the suspects now?
Yes, spill the tea. I'm ready.
Okay, so the first one was Frank Dolezal. He was a 52-year-old Cleveland resident. He ended up being arrested for it. He was an alcoholic bricklayer, which I say, you better check those buildings. Dolezal confessed that he killed Flo Polillo, who was the 3rd victim, but he said he did it out of self-defense.
I just don't believe that's in self-defense.
But also, he was unaware of the details of her killing.
Interesting.
Later, Dolezal recanted his whole confession because he said that he was beaten into submission by the sheriff's jailer. Frank Dolezal ended up dying by suicide in custody, and suicide is in quotations.
Oh.
At the Cuyahoga County Jail 6 weeks after his arrest. He hung himself on a hook that was 5 feet 7 inches from the ground. Frank was 5'8". There's no way.
He's a short king.
Right. There's no way.
No, yeah, that's no way.
After his death, they found that he had 6 cracked ribs that his friends said he did not have when he was arrested. And also, no one believes that he was the killer. A marker was laid on Dolezal's grave in 2010 that says, "Rest now."
What's interesting about that is that reminds me of the final suspects in the Monster of Florence, in that they only confessed to, like, the last murder.
Right.
And this guy only confessed to the Florence murder. Florence and Florence. That's just interesting because it's like, how are you... If you know that they're connected and you've got somebody and he's only talking about one of them, I just feel like you've got the wrong person.
I mean, the fact that he didn't know.
He didn't know the details, but also he's only talking about that one when there were way more than one. And that's the same as those guys that went to prison for that. Like, they only talked about that final couple. They didn't talk about anything else, just that couple.
Right.
But
also that gets into the corruption that I mentioned earlier, and we'll get into that next. But just for a little bit of finality and, what's the word?
I don't know where you're going with this, so I don't know what word you're thinking of.
Like tying up loose ends. Frank Dolezal was vindicated posthumously. Okay, so here's the doozy. You ready? This is the other suspect, which I think did it, but... we'll get into that.
How many times have you said we'll get into that today?
I don't know. I'm feeling it today, I guess.
You just know what you have, and you're like, we'll be there soon.
I know. I'm like dangling you all by a thread.
I would like not to be dangled by a thread.
Don't dangle me.
No. That's
Put that on a t-shirt. Don't dangle me.
It's not what I would like.
So the other suspect was Dr. Francis E. Sweeney.
You know what they say about the word Sweeney? They say think of Sweeney Todd.
He was the alcoholic first cousin of Congressman Martin L. Sweeney of Cleveland, Ohio. He served in World War I as a medic and was discharged with a note that he was 25% disabled.
25%?
Which I don't know what that means.
That's a little bit weird and specific.
But Sweeney, when he drank so heavily, he would become violent, erratic, and would disappear for days at a time.
That is suspicious.
He was discharged from his practice after his wife committed him for treatment of his alcoholism in 1933. They divorced in 1936. There were 2 court-ordered psychiatric examinations found him sane in 1938. Dr. Sweeney was looked at as a very probable suspect, but Congressman Sweeney heard about this and supposedly he made a deal with the investigating sheriff to look to find a better suspect.
Oh, yeah.
Elliot Ness named Dr. Sweeney as the killer in 1938. He's like, I know it's him. Ness was the special agent that became famous for his efforts to bring down Al Capone and enforce prohibition. That's what I was thinking of earlier.
Damn, that's a pretty cool thing to... Well, prohibition's not cool, I guess, but like...
But Al Capone is.
The Al Capone thing is pretty cool. I mean...
Ness thought it was best to keep this suspect a secret due to the circumstances with who he was. So one of the reasons for believing the killer was Sweeney was because at one time he was living at Sandusky Soldiers and Sailors Home in Bogart, which was just south of Sandusky. A person's dog walked into its home with a severed human leg in its mouth in that area.
Wouldn't you just... I know.
I know, Minerva.
I agree. If I had a dog that brought me a human leg, oh my god, you're turning my chair. Oh, now you're on the table. Baby, you can't be on the table. It makes such loud noises.
I can hear her purring.
I know. That's what I was looking
through the table.
That's why I was looking at you. I was like, I can hear her.
Another encounter that led to the belief the killer was Sweeney was an account recalled by Emil Fronick. In November of 1934, Fronick claimed he was walking up Broadway toward the intersection of East 55th in Cleveland when a physician invited him into his office. The doctor said he would give Fronick some shoes and then something to eat. He brought out some meat and potatoes with coffee. Fronic was hungry, but while eating, he got sick and started to lose focus, so he just ran out the door. I mean, good on him, you know. He made it to a boxcar, and then he passed out, and he awoke 3 days later.
So he was hella drugged.
Yeah, and some drifters found him.
You really can hear her purring in the background of you speaking.
She's like,
if you really listen.
Police transported him in 1938 to Cleveland to try to retrace his path from his story from 1934, which is Fronic. And they determined the location was between East 50th and East 55th on the north side of the street. You ready for this?
I'm ready. I'm petting the cat, but I'm I'm also listening. I promise I'm doing both, but she's being pretty cute right now. I'm gonna take a picture.
That's going on our Instagram story. Dr. Edward Paterka had a building between East 50th and East 55th that Sweeney actually shared with him.
Ooh, so that tracks.
It does track. Sweeney and Paterka's office building was also right beside a funeral home, which led a lot of people to question if Sweeney had a deal with an undertaker to work on the bodies in the funeral home.
Or he even could have done it like after hours
right.
if he was sneaky enough.
A funeral home would have been the best place to explain away a bunch of the blood.
True, and it would have every single supply that you need.
Yeah, because that's everything. What they do. I mean... so Ness claimed Sweeney failed a
She's like doing the...
She's making biscuits.
But she's on a hard table.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Sorry, everybody, if you don't like the ambient sounds of cat purring on your podcast, but like, I am not moving her from this table. If she wants to lay here, she can lay here, and I'm not going to stop her.
Ness claimed Sweeney failed a polygraph test, and he ultimately avoided prosecution by committing himself into a mental hospital. Sweeney was diagnosed in the mental hospital as being schizophrenic. They eventually let him go due to circumstantial evidence, and it's said that Sweeney would often send taunting notes to Ness. He died in 1964 in a veterans hospital in Dayton.
Come on, no deathbed confession. Don't be selfish.
Right. But yeah, so I think it really looks like him. But I wanted to shout out James, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Badal, who worked as a case expert and gathered all of this information. He did a lot of the investigating on this, like after the fact. And he believes that without a doubt, the Cleveland torso killer, also known as the Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, was definitely Sweeney.
It seems pretty indisputable. There's nothing that doesn't work.
I definitely think it was him, and he just didn't get convicted because he knew people in high places.
I mean, was it literally his brother?
His cousin.
A cousin that was a congressman?
Yeah.
And they care about, like, even though technically it's kind of unfair, like, you're not going to elect somebody whose relative is a serial killer.
Right.
Even though they didn't do anything, that really would ruin your political career. Not saying that excuses hiding it, but, like, it would ruin your political career.
For real.
And politicians care about very little apart from their career. It doesn't surprise me that they would get it covered up. And, I mean, he had an office in that area. The funeral home thing really fits.
Oh, yeah. And, like, if he did have a deal with somebody that he could use a portion of the funeral home.
Or again, I wanna say again, like, he also could have just been breaking in. He could have just been sneaking in at night.
Yeah. But, I'm thinking, like, in terms of, like, if he was doing, like, weird experiments or research or something, like, that would prolong him dumping the bodies, like you said earlier, Right.
I'm just saying, like, if he had a deal with somebody, I just feel like maybe eventually they would have come out and said something.
Yeah, maybe.
And so that's why I'm like, well, he could have just been breaking in. Or, to be fair, he could have lied about why he needed it. Like, got a person who worked there to be like, can I use this after hours for, I don't know, science.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
And maybe they didn't even know what was happening.
Well, and he was a doctor, too, and he also knew people in high places.
Right. You're not like, oh, this congressman's cousin who's a doctor is definitely killing and dismembering people in my funeral home. No, you'd be like, oh, he's trying to he's doing little experiments with maybe, like, people who donated their bodies to science or something.
Yeah, or something, yeah.
And, yeah, so maybe, I just feel like if somebody was complicit and knew, then they might have said something by now.
Right.
That's basically why I'm leaning towards them probably not knowing.
But he still,
Yeah, because I just feel like, even, especially after he was dead, I just feel like you could be like, okay, I'm going to come out and tell you this now.
Right. I don't know when the congressman died. I'm going to look it up. Martin L. Sweeney. He died in 1960.
Look at his face. Does he look like a guy who has a serial killer for a cousin and didn't want to ruin his political career?
Yeah.
He looks like that?
He does.
He's got vibes?
Yeah. He was 75 when he died.
Oh, yeah. Look at...
He definitely looks...
He looks like he had a cousin for a serial killer and didn't want to ruin his political
he was
career.
Democrat.
Oh. No, he still looks like it.
Sweeney, huh?
Yeah, I feel like only thing I would say is technically, most of that is circumstantial.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
nothing ties him to the victims, where they were dropped off. Nothing places him at the scene. Nobody can place him with those people. Like,
right.
Everything about it
he
is
was just in the area, though.
Yeah, it's like the Monster of Florence one, where that guy had the theory about the guy who was like, oh, and he's also the Zodiac killer. And he spun this whole narrative that sounded really good until you realize that there's nothing behind that except for speculating. And technically, there's nothing behind a lot of this except for speculating.
Right, and that's
his
why it's
office
unsolved,
was
though.
in the area, and this, that, and the other. But I think it's pretty compelling that it was him.
Yeah.
It kind of checks boxes. It like lines up.
For sure.
So I can see it. It sucks that basically every single person that like him and then like his cousin, the senator, congressman, whatever, are all dead. And like if he had help, if he did use the funeral home and they did know that he was doing it, they're probably dead.
Yeah.
Like, there's no deathbed confessions happening.
Because it was 1930.
Every single person involved is dead. Like,
they were adults then, so that means they were born in, like, before.
Right, they were probably born in, like...
the early 1900s.
The 10s or the zeros or however you call it.
Even the late 1800s.
True, even, like, the 1890s, 1880s.
Because that's when the cousin was born, 1888.
Yeah, so, yeah, literally no one's going to come out and be like, yeah, I knew that.
Yeah.
Unless they had, like, kids and they find, like, some dusty diary somewhere or something.
Right.
Other than that, like, that's not going to come out. And, like, DNA is not going to come out and help when they're dismembered bodies from, like, forever and ever ago and they were burned. And he probably wore gloves if he was a doctor and working in the funeral home. Like, there's just nothing that I could see coming out and solving it now, which I hate.
Yeah, I know. I just keep thinking about Dusty Diary. I don't know. I like that.
Thank you.
I'm, like, thinking about them finding it. Do you know anything about the Chamber of Secrets? But yeah, that's it for today. I hope you'd enjoy it. I can't talk.
I hope you'd enjoy it.
I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. So, yeah, we got another serial killer in the books. He had some similar Monster of Florence vibes for sure, but that just it always alarms me that there's that many people who just want to dismember bodies.
Yeah, it's not anything I ever dreamed about.
No.
But then again, I don't think I'm a psychopath.
No, I don't think you are either. No. I think you would have figured that out by now.
Probably.
You probably would have mutilated something by now if you were a psychopath.
It's true.
I don't think it would have been like latent and hiding in you for 30 years.
Yeah.
But maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
No.
You know, head trauma does that to people, so.
I don't hit my head that often.
Hopefully you don't, because it might unlock something.
Uh-oh.
You know, that's a thing. You know, that is a thing.
Yeah.
A lot of serial killers.
The brain is weird.
But that happens in, like, childhood, not, like, now. So I think you're probably still safe.
Okay.
But, yeah, thanks for listening. Follow us on the socials. I'm going to try to not make this part so long. Interact with us on anything you want, everything you want. Rate and review us, please. And tell your friends about us if you think they would have a good time vibing with us in the podcast.
Also, you can always email us, too, at mysteriosities@gmail.com. And if you have any, like, topics that you would like us to cover or anything that you would think we would find interesting and want to talk about, we love suggestions. So
honestly, I may set up a Google form, which is like, you know, people can just go boop and I may set that up and link that on our link trees.
That'd be cool.
And then you don't even have to send us an email. You can just type in a suggestion and send it, and it will go to our Google Forms, and we can.
It's a good idea.
Keep track of that. Thank you. I love a Google form.
Yeah, I like that.
Keep your eyes out on that as well, because that would be a very easy way for y'all to give suggestions. That would be easy for us to see as opposed to keeping track of emails.
And spread the word if you like us. Obviously, if you're listening this far, you kind of do. So
you at least
you're still tuning in.
You sort of are tolerating us.
Yeah, thanks for listening. And we are Mysteriosities.
That is the
We did
second
it
time
again.
in a row. I knew you were. I wanted to jump in because I knew you were about to do it.
I like